I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing next to what I gain. Come tear down every idol, so this heart won't stray. Don't let me stray. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till.
And good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Threshing floor here on lambnetwork.tv, where we discuss and sort through what is going on in the body of Messiah today, and whether it be truth or a lie. It is being threshed about. My name is Darryl Weinberg of Light to the Nations Messianic Ministries. You can see our website down there, alttonmessianic.com. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can see all the archives of these shows. Well, it's good to be with you today. I appreciate everybody joining us. And I've got my my faithful red mark on God's forehead mug, and I also got pens too. I don't know if you knew that, and we have journals, anything to do with keeping notes on the truth of God's word. So if you're interested in getting any of this, and plus we've got a specialized coffee as well. And we're going to do a little shameless promotion today because it's good to have, and it makes the study of God's word all that more exciting. So, as you can see, I'm flying solo today. Next week, we'll be having a very interesting guest talking about a very interesting subject. And I think everybody will want to tune into that. It's going to be on the issue of tithing and what the Bible says about that. But it's not going to be what you think. But today, something that has kind of been percolating in my spirit over the last little while to discuss is the whole issue of Israel's recent recognition of the country of Somaliland and why it has caused such an uproar across the world. I mean, it is, first of all, most of us are probably saying, what is Somaliland? Like, where is this place? But just by the name of it, you can already start to sense that there's something at play here. As you know, recently in the news, there's been a whole bunch of coverage of Somalia and what's been going on there, and specifically in the state of Minnesota, because Minnesota has the highest population of Somalis all across the United States. I don't know why they would have chosen to, an African country right near the equator, wanting to settle in one of the coldest states in the union. But hey, listen, whatever floats your boat. But there has been a huge amount of coverage and exposure going on of just the sheer massive amount of fraud that's been happening through the Somali community. And of course, it's been facilitated by Governor Tim Walz and the mayor of Minneapolis, Frey, and Mark Frey, I think his name is. And they're all Democratic stooges, and it's the Democratic Party in the United States essentially become the party of theft of the American citizens to fund its own destruction. I can't understand why these people do what they do, but you've got Ilhan Omar, who is one of the congresswomen there. And even the arrival of her in the United States is all questionable, but she came as a refugee and she worked her way to Congress And apparently her net worth has skyrocketed to something like $30 million. That's not bad for an uneducated refugee, right? So, but on the other side of the world, you have Israel recognizing Somaliland, which is not Somalia, and everybody's got their shorts in a knot about it. So I wanted to kind of dive into that today and discuss, well, what is this all about and what is happening and what is God doing about all this? So, first of all, where is Somaliland? And that's a very good question. So, if we take a look at the map here, nope, that's not what I want. There we go. So, as you can see, Somalia here. So, this is the Horn of Africa. Here's Kenya. And here is Uganda, right next door, which is where I was. I was right down here in Kampala. So you got Kenya, you got Somalia right next to the north of Kenya, northeast. And then you got Ethiopia and Djibouti over here. So Somalia goes all the way around here. However, you've got some different sub areas. You've got Puntland. This is a disputed area. And then Somaliland is right over here, right next to Djibouti. And being able to understand what's going on, you kind of have to have a history of the country of Somalia. So how did Somalia become a country to begin with? Well, there was a whole bunch of tribes there, which is the way Africa works. And they gained independence back in about 1960. This is when a lot of the colonial powers like England and Spain and France, they kind of pulled back and gave independence to all these different colonies of theirs. Not that they haven't stopped raping and pillaging, especially the French. They continue to abuse their colonies like Niger and other places where they've now been kicked out because they were just bleeding them dry from all the resources. But so you had all these different states over there, and Somaliland was given its independence back in about 1960. And then Somalia did its own thing and whatever. But what happened is Somalia did an end run around everybody, and they declared a new constitution which made everybody part of one country. And the Somaliland people had no say in all this. So they kind of got absorbed into this. Well, Somalia suffered a military coup under the Dabar regime, and it, like most African dictatorships, was absolutely brutal. And there was widespread oppression. There was hundreds of thousands of people were killed, disappeared, and just that's the way things go over there. And you kind of see the same thing happening now in Iran, where the regime is just coming down like a ton of bricks on the people. It's estimated that over 20,000 people have been killed in the protests. It's just it's horrendous what's going on. So the famously, the military dictatorship is overthrown in around 1990, and this is what led to Somalia kind of disintegrating. And it was made famous by the Civil War over there. You had the movie Black Hawk Down, where the U.S. Black Hawk helicopter crashed, and all that happened with there. So Somalia it's a brutal country. and it is consistently ranked as one of the most dangerous in the world for Christians to be in. Like next to North Korea, it's like number 1 or 2. Sudan and Somalia. Somalia is probably the second worst place for Christians to be. And it's chaos there. So Somaliland decides that, you know what, we're not having part of this. And back in around 1990, 91, they redeclared their independence, got a new constitution, and they said, we don't want anything to do with all this. And so they've been operating as an independent country for the past 35 years. Problem is, though, is that nobody wanted to recognize them, even though they've been doing their own thing. They have kept themselves separate from what's going on in Mogadishu. And they've said, you know what, we're just going to live peacefully. Somalia, the entire area is Muslim. A lot of African countries are, as a matter of fact. If you look, Kenya is not a Muslim country, but Mombasa, which is the port city, is definitely a Muslim area. Ethiopia is a Christian country, a Coptic Christian, but there are problems there too. And then you've got Eritrea, and but all around here, and then Tanzania, which is down below Kenya, is also a Muslim country. And then you've got Sudan to the north. They'd be up here. Sudan, also very dangerous. And they've had a civil war going on there for decades. About 500,000 people have died in that. It's horrible. And then most recently, back in 2011, you had right north of Uganda here, you had South Sudan become a country. So you've got all this confusion over here. And what Israel recently did is it declared that it was going to recognize Somaliland. And although Somaliland is also a Muslim country, it is a moderate Muslim country, which means that it's not jihadist. See, there are plenty of Muslim countries in the world that are not trying to spread jihadism, which is the war concept and domination that we see going on, especially in Iran. Iran is probably the worst case of that, but you have many other countries that are trying to do the same thing. And Somalia is also doing that. Now, the jihadist countries tend to be, although not exclusively, Shiite, because there's two primary branches in Islam. You've got Sunni and then you've got Shiite. And the primary difference between them is that it has to do with who is the successor to Muhammad. And within Shiite Islam, you have the belief that the 12th Mahdi, which is their ruler, is going to come and he will actually be a Messiah figure. So Somaliland is not jihadi. It's not jihadist in its makeup. It's not trying to spread jihad, which is holy war, to the rest of the world. One of the reasons why there's so much fraud going on in Minnesota, it was an interesting article that I read, that someone had talked about the IQ level of Somalis. And this isn't to denigrate them or anything like that. Listen, they're human, they're created in God's image. God loves them too. And when a Somali person comes to the Lord, I don't know if there are any churches or anything like that of Somali people, but when a Somali person comes to the Lord, they are loved every bit as much. However, because of the culture, see, when we talk about IQ levels, It's really an emphasis on education. And within the Somali, right across Somalia, they have one of the lowest recorded IQs of any country in the entire world. Why? Because they're not educating their people over there. There's been such chaos that it is they don't get the education that they need. And so when they come to another country, especially when they're jihadist in their makeup, so you got low IQ jihadist people, and within the mindset of Islam, theft and lying and all of that, taqiyya, there's all these different concepts within Islam are perfectly legitimate. There was one Somali person in Minnesota that said that all of this theft, and you've got fraud going on to the tune of billions of dollars. Billions. And Minnesota is not exactly a hugely populated state. I mean, I've been to Minnesota before, man. It's cold up there. There's not a lot of people outside of St. Paul and Minneapolis. And you've got billions of dollars. But what this person said is that the fraud is perfectly legitimate because within Islam, the what is the word that they use? Kifas, that the non-Muslims are second-class citizens, and within Islam, when you go to an Islamic country, that non-Muslims are actually taxed. Okay, if you're not a Muslim, then you are taxed as a second-class citizen. So what this person was saying is that all this fraud that's going on in Minnesota is legitimate because it's essentially a tax on the unbeliever. And the other thing is that the reason why so many people from Somalia are involved in this is because that's why they were sent there. That's why Ilhan Omar was elected to Congress. Now, don't think that George Soros didn't have anything to do with that. Of course he did. I mean, this is the game that they all play. Same thing with AOC. The reason why AOC got into Congress is because she did a casting call, and she was funded by the globalists to get in there and cause all kinds of disruption. Do they actually have the smarts to legitimately do that? No, of course they don't. That's the whole game that's been going on, and that's the judgment of God, that you've got these leaders that are not very bright, sorry to say. But the reason why there's so many that are involved in the fraud is because they've got low IQ, they have a jihadist mentality, and so therefore, when they steal from the kafia, or whatever the unbeliever is called, they look at it as one-upmanship. We got you. It's this game that they play, and it's a really insidious mindset. It's terrible. So you have these jihadi people who aren't very bright being sent over the United States by the millions. And it's not only in Minnesota. You've got them in Ohio too. And what they're doing is and reports have just been coming out about them taking suitcase loads of money, okay, millions of dollars in suitcases, in cash, to the airports and sending it back to Somalia. What are they doing with it? Is it to fund luxury lifestyles and buy villas and stuff like that, as Zelensky's cronies are doing, buying Swiss mansions and things like that, and yachts with U.S. and Canadian taxpayer money? Mark Carney, our illustrious prime minister, decided to, last time Zelensky came traipsing through town a few weeks back, decided to hand him another $2.5 billion of our money. And if you knew of the taxes that we have here in Canada, it would make your blood boil. But again, we're under judgment in this country, or certainly severe discipline, because we've been murdering our babies and our people, so God gives us wicked government. But I digress. But so is all this money being sent over to Somalia in order to fund the fat cat lifestyles of a few crooks? Well, in part. I mean, look what happened with the leaders of Black Lives Matter and how many mansions they bought. But that's not the only thing that it's doing. What all this money is doing, it is funding holy war. It's going to the terrorist group Al-Shabaab or Shabab or something like that. And they're one of the groups around the world that are committing terrorist attacks, primarily in Somalia, but elsewhere as well. So the globalists send these jihadists over to the United States. They commit massive amounts of fraud. The Democrats are in cahoots. Tim Walz is one of the most reprehensible figures in U.S. government, and that's saying a lot. And don't think that he hasn't enriched himself greatly. But this money is then being stolen, taken back, and then funding terrorist groups. And like back in 1994, when the Black Hawk helicopter went down, soldiers were killed. So in effect, what the Democratic government is doing, it is using U.S. taxpayer money to enrich themselves and then fund the demise of the American Republic. It is, when you think about it, you are participating in your own demise, thinking, here's the thing, is that all of these people think that they're going to be safe from the tyranny that they're trying to bring in. Isn't that amazing? Problem is, though, is that Tim Walz isn't a Muslim. He's just an opportunist. AOC is also not a Muslim, even though she supports them and marches for Palestine. She thinks that they're going to have mercy on her. And a lot of these people don't realize, and this is what happened in Iran with the Khomeini revolution back in 1979. When he came to power, he promised, what did Khomeini do? How did he get the people? Well, listen, the Shah was incredibly corrupt. He was a U.S., a CIA, and M16 asset. That's why he was. That's why they overthrew the government in 1953, and they put in their own stooge to keep the oil flowing for British and American interests. And his corruption was notorious. He was also listen, he dealt with his political opponents as all people in the Middle East do. Apparently he wasn't as brutal as Khomeini tried to make him out to be. I mean, Khomeini accused him of murdering millions of people, but he wasn't a very good guy. And but Khomeini came in exile in France. And he's promising everybody what? Communism, free stuff. It's amazing how the communists and the Islamists get into bed together. You've got this new guy down in New York now, Momdani, who is a jihadist. His parents, one of his parents at least, is a Columbia University professor. No surprise there. You want to talk about a hotbed of leftist thinking. Columbia is one of the worst. But he is a progressive socialist, he calls himself. Well, what that means is that he's a communist. It's just that they don't have all the guns yet. The only difference between a communist and a socialist, truly, is the communists have guns. yeah, you've got socialistic countries in Europe like Sweden and like that, but they're not truly socialist in their philosophy. But so Khomeini promises them all kinds of free stuff, and then what happens? He gets into power, and a lot of these people that supported his rise to power ended up, going in front of the execution squads. And so when you have non-Muslims that are supporting the Muslims, they don't realize that their heads are going to be on the chopping block too. It's just it's so incredibly stupid, and people have no idea what they're doing. So you've got this massive amount of fraud that's happening. You've got these people that are coming over here and they're funding all of this. And Somalia is one of the worst. I mean, it is one of the most dangerous. Do not book a vacation in Mogadishu. Let's just put it that way. It's not going to be a good time. Chances are everybody's going to look at you. You'll be dead in no time. Okay? Not number one on your travel agency's itinerary is for destinations. So, but then you've got this Somaliland kind of over there on the other side of the Horn. And by the way, that's a very, very strategic place. Through here, the Horn of Africa, going up through the Gulf of Aden and then into the Red Sea, of course, that leads you up to the canal right there at Egypt and going into the Mediterranean. And a high percentage of ships go through there. I mean, 25-30%, I think, of all maritime traffic goes through the Suez Canal, which, by the way, Israel gave back after the 67 war. I think incredibly foolish move, or sorry, 56. They took Suez, and then our at the time foreign minister Lester Pearson, who eventually became prime minister of Canada, negotiated a peace deal, which he won a peace prize for, and convinced Israel to give it back. Dumb move. Israel could have been in charge of Suez, and things would have been a whole lot different, believe you me. So anyway, but that's neither here nor there. So you've got Somaliland here, and it's been kind of doing its own thing. I don't really know all of this, what's going on over here, or I have no idea what goes on in Puntland and where they sit in things and what's going on. But point is, bad stuff is happening here. These guys are relatively peaceful. And yet, even though when Somalia fell apart, and they kind of declared their own thing and said, we don't want to do anything with it. And they have a fully functioning government. And by the way, it works a lot better than Somalia. Somalia is an absolute basket case. Yet nobody was willing to recognize them. And so they kind of bumped along. They did what they were going to do. Well, all of a sudden, a couple months ago, I think actually at the beginning of December it was, Israel decides that it is going to recognize Somaliland, and it becomes the first country in the world to do so. Well, what do you think the reaction in Somaliland was? They're waving Israeli flags. They're absolutely ecstatic about this. This is a huge breakthrough for them because, number one, it gives them international recognition. Number two, as I mentioned, they are not jihadist in their philosophy. These people aren't looking to bring the entire world under the sword of Islam. They just want to live their lives and do their things. Not every Muslim is a jihadist. We have some actually very good friends of ours that live very close to us. They're from Afghanistan. I met him because he actually lived with my aunt in Toronto when he first came over, and then he eventually brought his wife, and absolutely lovely people. We have great They come over to our place, and we have them celebrate Passover and Hanukkah and things like that with us. They're wonderful people. They don't have a jihadist bone in their body. As a matter of fact, the wife is kind of like, not so big. They're still Muslims. They haven't said that they want to change or anything like that, but they're not so enamored with a lot of the aspects of their faith. But when you have a jihadist mentality, then you have hatred that is bred into you. One of the things that when the IDF went into Gaza and they started going into the various houses, you know which book that they found more than any other in the houses of the militants? It's Mein Kampf. So this hatred, this visceral hatred of the Jewish people is what drives them. Now they hate they hate everybody that's not Muslim, but they, of course, especially they hate the Jewish people. So what does all this mean? Why is this such a big deal? What is the point of Israel recognizing Somaliland? I mean, what does this have to do with anything? Well, if you've noticed, since Netanyahu got in government, and I am not a huge fan of Benjamin Netanyahu. I will go on record as stating so. I think he's incredibly corrupt. He's on his third wife. I don't think there's been any proof of it, but there are rumors that he is a 33rd degree Mason, as many of Israel's prime ministers are, 32nd, 33rd. Yitzhak Rabin, who was assassinated in 95, he was 32nd, I think. Yitzhak Shamir, also, he was, I think, a 32nd. Ariel Sharon, if I'm not mistaken. Most of Israel's prime ministers have been Masons. So we know where their allegiance are. They're globalists. And within Freemasonry, what is their primary objective? To establish the third temple so that the Antichrist will have a place to come in. Netanyahu might be one of them. I don't know. But he's made a lot of very strategic errors. How he has fought this war in Gaza has cost a lot of IDF soldiers' lives. Because had they really done it properly, they would have gone in, they would have just leveled Gaza and said, if you don't give back the hostages by tomorrow, we're going to raise every building in the strip. End of story. They played this cat and mouse game. And oftentimes, and this is what Israel has been guilty of ever since 1948, is trying to placate the world. You know, they're not interested in that. What did Ariel Sharon do in giving Gaza back to them? What on earth would have possessed him, maybe literally, to do something like that? And by the way, right after he did that, he was felled with a stroke and lay in a coma for 7 years until he passed. It was judgment. He is not, and nobody is supposed to be giving away God's land. He gave that to the nation of Israel, to the people of Israel, and it is nobody's to give away to anybody else, especially the enemies of Israel and the enemies of God. So I'm not a big fan of Netanyahu. There are serious questions as to who was responsible for October 7th. October 7th was allowed to happen. There was a stand down order. There's no way that would have taken the IDF 6 hours to respond to what happened. They would have known before they got within 100 meters of the fence to go to the other side. And that thing could have stopped if it had been truly a real attack. But what it was a false flag event. Was Netanyahu involved? I can't see how he wouldn't have been. So there are many, many questions about this man. And when he talks, he goes to the UN and everything else, and I feel that he is trying to sell something. At the same time, he is, though, a very crafty and cunning leader. And he also has done great things for Israel. Under his watch, Israel has become, and I don't know if people are thinking about this or not. I know some people are, and that's why they're so mad. Israel has become a major power in the Middle East. Before it was completely dependent upon the US for survival, as well as maybe some other countries. And yet it has transformed itself into the dominant economy. I mean, through this whole war, the stock market is going crazy. New deals are being signed all the time, a lot of it in the defense area. It is just rolling out a new defense system which uses lasers to take down missiles. So we have the Iron Dome, we have David Sling. There's three major there's three major defense systems dealing with different weapons. Now they're just producing, and I can't remember what the name of it is, but it's a laser system. So a missile's coming in, you shoot a laser beam and it drops it down. That is infinite. You don't need a missile to counter another missile. One of the things that the Biden regime was trying to do to Israel was to hamstring them by not delivering to them munitions that would help them in their defense. So you've got October 7th that happens. You've got Hezbollah that immediately the next day launches something like 8,000 missiles over the next several months, like hundreds at a time. And Israel's, they got to send up all these things. Well, if you run out of munitions, if you run out of missiles and bombs and stuff like that, you're defenseless. You get this laser thing in place and they've got, 20, 30, 50 of these installations across. Nothing's going to be able to get in there. So Israel is now positioning itself and growing into a major regional power. And one of the main issues that people have with Israel, and Jeffrey Sachs, who is the Columbia University professor, and also he's closely tied in with the World Health Organization. He's a brilliant man, pleasure to listen to, except when you actually start listening to his words, because he hates Israel. He hates Netanyahu. He thinks Netanyahu is one of the most dangerous men on the face of this earth because, everybody's harping on this greater Israel project, that there are certain elements within Israel that want to try to take by force the biblical boundaries, which is from the Mediterranean all the way to Euphrates. And, General Scott, or was it Colonel Scott McGregor, General Scott McGregor? I can't remember his rank, but, he's talking about that in 2000, right after 9/11, he was handed a list of 7 countries that they were going to do regime change with. And it was Syria, and it was Iraq, it was Iran, it was all the enemies of Israel. And that he was told that the U.S. was going to do this. So this comes in part to everybody's objections to Israel, and that really they've got territorial designs. Maybe so. And there are certainly elements. You've got a couple of members of the Knesset, Smotrich and Ben Gvir, who are rabidly anti-Arab. They are certainly, these guys are a little bit unbalanced. And you can't have that kind of militancy, I think, within the government. I don't agree with how they view things. I view with maybe some of their objectives. I don't necessarily agree with how they go about it. And do I believe that that land belongs to Israel? Yes. But is the time for it now? No. But Israel helping to overthrow the Assad regime, and how do they do that? They took out Hezbollah. You see, because Assad was an Iranian proxy. His regime was propped up by Iran and supported by Hezbollah, which is Iran's terrorist organization in Lebanon. There, once the pager event went down, no longer was Hezbollah. I mean, Israel absolutely decimated Hezbollah, especially when they took out Nasrallah last year. Brilliant campaign. So Assad falls. Now, do you have a better situation there with the al-Julani regime? No, because that's ISIS. So that's a Sunni jihadist group as opposed to a Shia jihadist group. I mean, you're not going to get any good choices there. But what Israel was doing is it's systematically taking out its enemies. Why wouldn't anybody do that? Why is everybody blaming Israel for taking out and wanting to take out regimes that are openly hostile to it? It doesn't make any sense. Isn't that what the U.S. is doing right now? Isn't that what Donald Trump just did in Venezuela? Maduro had to go. They're flooding the country with drugs. They're letting the Chinese get to set up shop there. And so what Trump did is he just turned around and said, we're going to reestablish the Monroe Doctrine. Now we're going to call it the Donroe Doctrine. And we're going to reestablish hegemony here in our homeland. Let China take care of China. They want to come here? No, it's not going to happen. So everybody's all upset about Israel establishing itself as a global power because they want Israel to lose. They see this is what this all comes down to. Anna Kasparian's on the, she's on someone's show, just frothing at the mouth. And she's a raving lunatic, by the way. And she's, I don't hate Israel. I don't hate the Jews, but I hate Israel. You can't make the distinction because for the Jewish people, Israel is the Jews. There's no separation. Jews are a nation, which means land, a race, and a religion. They're a particular bloodline, particular DNA, distinct from all other people in the world. They have a nation, and they also have a religion, and you can't separate them. So when someone converts from, let's say, Judaism to Catholicism or something like that, or if they become believers in Yeshua the Messiah and they're told, well, you're not Jewish anymore. No, I am still a Jew. I don't practice rabbinic Judaism, but I'm still a Jew. So you may say that I'm a bad Jew, but I'm still a Jew. There's this hatred of Israel for wanting to defend itself and wanting to destabilize the nations that are wanting to destabilize it and eliminate it. So it only makes sense. But as I keep mentioning over and over again, Chris Cuomo, who's wrong in a lot of things, but when it comes to Israel, he says that Israel's never allowed to win. True. So going back to Somaliland, you thought I'd never get that. What does this have to do with anything? What has this got to do with anything? Why would Israel recognize Somaliland? What advantage is there for Israel in this? Well, a couple things. It gives Israel who is an expanding power in the Middle East right now, influence in a very strategic area of Africa for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got an alliance. And what do you think Somaliland is going to want from the Israelis more than anything else? You've got an alliance that you're developing there. There's going to be embassies set up, blah, blah, blah. What do you think they're going to want more than anything else? They're going to want defense help. You've got a bunch of crazy lunatics that are over there in Somalia who are going to want to bring Somaliland back under the fold again if they can ever get their act together, which they probably never will. But Israel going in, Israel is probably the number one, maybe next to the US, defense country in the world as far as production of defense systems and understanding. To pull off what the Mossad did with the pager operation was unprecedented. There are going to be books written about that. There are going to be movies made about that. That was one of the most brilliant espionage moves in the history of espionage. One of those brilliant. For them to pull that off, so Somaliland is going to get help from the best of the best. But there's even something more important. As soon as I figure out how to pour my coffee here, hang on. So I'm getting all fired up about this. There's another reason why Israel is wanting to establish a foothold there. Because what do you think is across the Gulf from Somaliland? You know what this country is here? It's Yemen, home of the Houthis, an Iranian proxy. Israel now gets to set up military operations, including maybe Air Force bases and things like that, right across the water from the Houthis, who have been not only terrorizing and firing missiles over at Israel, not very effectively. And keep in mind that Israel is like 2,200 kilometers away. Now you're a couple of hundred kilometers away. The Houthis start getting uppity again. They've been quiet for a while since they bombed them into oblivion, and since Iran has been busy trying to quell the millions of people that want to overthrow the regime. But now Israel can start striking back at its enemies much more effectively. And they can also help here with international shipping, because not only do you have the Houthis that are firing missiles at Israel, but they are they're sinking ships. They're attacking freight ships. And a lot of it has to do with what's going to Israel. So they say, if you're going to do business with Israel, we're going to shoot you. And they have taken down a couple of ships. They've damaged some, and I think they've sunk a few. So Israel now sets up shop right across the ocean. So you have to look at this from a spiritual perspective, though. God is revealing all of the fraud that's going on from Somalia here over in the United States, and the funding of terrorist activities and stuff like that. And at the same time, Israel is putting an alliance together with a country that was part of the Somalian conglomerate. I mean, again, you think of Somalia as one country. In Uganda, there's like 48 or 54 different tribes, and none of them like each other. One of the big issues that Uganda has always had, and they just had elections a couple of days ago, is that the tribes can never get along. You go from one part of the country to another, they can't even understand each other. There is not, in Kenya, for instance, although you've got different tribal languages, everybody in Kenya speaks Swahili. In Uganda, because it was a British colony, most people speak English over there, which was a great relief to me. I could communicate wherever I went, praise God. But man, oh man, like they don't like each other. And so you've got this internecine warfare that's been going on in Somalia. Israel is starting to swoop in and establish a presence there, which means that they are going to now have more control, and they're going to be able to start dealing with the Houthis. And that should make everybody happy. And you know why we should be cheering for this? Because you've got about 21 or 22 Islamic countries that are all mad at this happening. Anytime you can tick off 22 Islamic countries all at the same time, you know you've done a good thing. They do not want Israel to have influence in the area, and they do not want their jihadist aims, because ultimately, listen, the United Arab Emirates and Kuwait and some of these other more moderate nations, don't think for one moment that they don't want the spread of Islam around the world. They may not agree with the Shiites. They hate them. And as a matter of fact, there's a biblical prophecy that says that Iran is eventually going to take out Saudi Arabia, which is the center, of course, Sunni Islam, because you've got the you've got Mecca there, and you've got the Kaaba stone. That's the center where Islam is the most holy site in Islam. But in Iran, they've got their own holy site there, different from Mecca. They don't come there. And there's a prophecy in the Bible, Iran is Elam. And it says that Elam, in a certain passage in Isaiah, is going to actually destroy Arabia, Saudi Arabia. They're probably going to attack Mecca and Medina. And Saudi Arabia is going to go up in smoke. So don't think for one moment they don't want this exported all over the place. Because whether it's Sunni or Shiite, it's better than having Christianity. And it's certainly better than Judaism. So this is getting people absolutely up in arms. And of course, the UN is all against this because they're a globalist and anti-Israel organization. So you've got fraud being exposed from the Somalians. Everything hidden will be revealed, and we're in a period of exposure right now. But you've got Israel establishing a foothold next to Somalia, where all this fraud is going on, and wherever Israel goes, it brings the Torah with it. I'm not talking about the government, but wherever Judaism, wherever the Jewish state settles itself, it brings blessing. Because Torah comes with it and the knowledge of God comes with it. And if you align yourself with Israel, you're going to be favored, even if Israel isn't necessarily doing things right. God judges Israel. Listen, you go to Isaiah chapter 40. It says, comfort my people, speak pleasant words to them, for they have suffered twice for all that they have done. God judges Israel all the time. Romans 2:9 says that judgment is to the Jew first. There are amazing things that are going on in the world right now. The Islamic regime may be ready to fall. I don't know. I have my doubts about that because Iran is going to be part of the war of Gog and Magog. They're going to come against Israel, aligned with Russia and Turkey, and a couple of other countries. So if the Islamic regime falls and you get a democratic government in there, some people want Pahlavi, who is the Shah's son. He's a CIA asset. So he would be controlled by the West. The Iranians don't want that either. But the government in Iran is going to come against Israel. So amazing things are afoot right now. You have got elements on the world stage that are truly amazing. And it's pretty exciting. So continue to pray about world events and pray that God gives us discernment as to what's going on, because there's so much happening and there's so much confusion out there that we need to be really keeping close to him. So that brings us to the end of our hour. I hope this has been instructive for you. I hope that it's brought some clarity to what's going on. And want to thank everybody for joining. Once again, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure you like and share, and make sure that you go visit our website, alttnmessianic.com. Going to wish everybody a Shavua Tov. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week on lamnetwork.tv. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
I won't run from the crushing. I'll hold on through the pain. What I lose means nothing.
If you missed today's show or want to watch it again, or want to tell someone where they can watch this episode, go to lamnetwork.tv, where you can find this show and all the other live Lamb Show archives in the on-demand section of the website. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to tell someone about the Messianic Lamb Network.
I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussions, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take a tour of the lamnetwork.tv website. I'm Darryl Weinberg, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
How can I ever complain? Forgive me, Lord. I just wanna be your sanctuary, a dwelling place for grace and mercy. Keep sifting me till everything is on the threshing floor. Let it fall on the threshing floor. Everything that's between